Good. Would you ask Mr. Bailey to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Mr. Bailey, ready to carry on?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. Yes, just a minute.
Mr. Bailey, still on the subject of design and design responsibility, can I ask you please to go to your witness statement at page 28? And I'd like us to look together, please, at paragraph 112 on that page. It starts on the page before, but you say there, perhaps we should start at the page before, actually. We should just go back to that page, page 27. You say, I believe the Reynolds-Bond ACM is compliant for a number of reasons. That's the context. And then over the page, back at page 28, you say, about halfway down, as far as Harley were concerned. Do you see that? I'm afraid it's a long passage and quite difficult to find. It's just below halfway down. You say, as far as Harley were concerned, Alcoa, now Arconic, were well aware of the Grenfell project and what the Reynolds-Bond ACM is being used for. Having reviewed Harley drawings for the Grenfell project, Alcoa, now Arconic, never raised any concerns or questions about its use. You see that?
Yes.
And then you go on to say, CEP, one of the largest ACM panel fabricators in the UK, who supply ACM panels to many other contractors and cladding companies, were also involved in discussions about the use of Reynolds-Bond ACM and supplied this material for the project. CEP did not raise any concerns about the use of Reynolds-Bond ACM for the project. Now, I read that all to you. Are you suggesting here that Arconic or CEP had some sort of responsibility for the design of the cladding system?
Not for the design of the cladding system, but if they are supplying a product that they believe to be dangerous, they would have told us.
Right.
Or the product wasn't appropriate for the use, they would have told us.
Yeah. The reason I ask about design is because you say, having reviewed Harley drawings for the Grenfell project, Alcoa never raised any concerns or questions, and nor did CEP. Mm-hmm. It's your reference to drawings which prompts the question. You see?
Yes.
It appears that you're saying that because, and maybe this is wrong, but because Harley drawings were seen by Alcoa and CEP, and they never uttered any warning about those drawings, that somehow indicated to you that they were acceptable. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So you are suggesting that Arconic or CEP had some sort of responsibility for the design of the cladding system?
I think the use of those panels on the building, yes.
And that's a slightly different question. What is it you are saying, to be crystal clear, Arconic and CEP had responsibility for?
For approving the use of the Reynolds-Bond product in that application.
I see. You then say at paragraph 42, it's earlier on, at page 11 of your statement. If we can just go to that, please. And this is on page 11, 4 lines up from the bottom. You say, at page 42, paragraph 42, I would have expected Alcoa and Arconic or CEP to have identified any significant issue with the design or choice of materials. No concerns were ever raised by them as to the use of their product for the refurbishment of Grenfell Tower. What was your expectation there expressed, based on?
If the material wasn't appropriate to be used, they would have told us.
Right.
If you're talking about the specific reference to design, that is the fabrication design of the panel as opposed to the design of the cladding system.
Can you explain that distinction in brief terms?
When a panel is made, it's routed, it's folded, there are size limitations on it, there are bending angles limitations, and there are wall thicknesses in terms of the hook-on position. So if some of those fabrication details weren't appropriate, they would have warned us.
So these are the fabrication details specific to the Grenfell Tower project, are they?
Yes.
I see. So you were relying, were you, on CEP and the manufacturers, particularly Bond, to warn you if the product wasn't suitable for the project. Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, we believed it was. Let's be clear. But if there was some reason that it wasn't, we would have expected Bond in particular to say, do not use this product.
Was it your understanding at the time that Bond, take Bond, itself understood that it had assumed responsibility for the appropriateness of the panels, whether the design of the panels or the product and materials themselves, for use on the Grenfell Tower project?
Yes.
What is it that led you to have that understanding about what they thought?
Because they've seen the project, they know how big it is, they know where it is. They were actively talking to the architects before we were ever involved with the project. So, yeah, I mean that's why we believe that they have approved and recommended their product for that job.
Was it normal for Harley to rely on the warnings or absence of warnings from the manufacturer and seller of materials to be used in a cladding system in order to satisfy itself that they were safe?
We looked at the BBA certificate for the product to satisfy ourselves that they're safe. But if Bond knew something that we didn't, as the manufacturers, we would then expect them to tell us.
Can we look at Harley's quotation? And we're switching topics. We're going to come back in due course to the BBA certificate for Bond. So I'm not leaving that there, just so you know. And I want to turn to your quotation again. We've seen it. It's HAR 30101155. And I'd like to go to page 12, please. And this is under the tender conditions. It's part of the tender conditions. And under the heading technical. And paragraph 6, you'll see it says, if Harley have not been engaged as the paid facade concept designer, we cannot control the likelihood that the priced facade solution will be suitable for the client. The risk for non-compliance must logically rest with the paid facade concept designer. Harley will simply price to the prescriptive drawings and specifications. Would you agree that in this case you were the paid facade concept designer?
No.
Why is that?
We didn't. The facade concept came from the architect.
So you say Studio E was the paid
Yes.
facade concept designer.
Yes.
To your understanding at the time, did Studio E know that?
I don't know.
You see, looking at clause 6, you say, if Harley haven't been engaged as a paid facade concept designer, we cannot control the likelihood that the priced facade solution will be suitable for the client. Are you saying that you didn't know or couldn't control whether the facade solution you were pricing was suitable for Ryden as your client?
No, I think what we're saying there is if something has been missed from the concept designer, and we haven't picked it up. That's not, that is something that we would reprice later.
Did you yourself take any steps, or did you know of anyone in Harley who took any steps to tell Studio E or Ryden that because you weren't the paid facade concept designer, you were not in a position to control whether or not the priced facade solution was suitable for the client?
No.
Why is that?
Other than this clause here.
If Harley had been the paid facade concept designer, what would it have done differently from what it did?
It may well have used different products, on a different layout. So we would have been starting as a paid facade concept designer back in 2012 or 2013. At the stage that we were involved with it, the materials had been set out in the MBS. So it was a prescriptive design that we were working to.
Can you, in the light of that answer, go back, please, to page 2 of this document? Page 2, where Mr. Albiston, who's presenting this quotation to Ryden, says in the second paragraph, we saw it earlier, our offer includes, for the design, supply and fix of a complete envelope package. It doesn't say we are not developing the facade concept and we're not being paid for the concept as a paid facade concept designer. Can you explain how the two reconcile?
Well, the concept design is done before we're involved. That's done by Studio E, who pass the design out to a number of tendering main contractors, who then go to a number of subcontractors. So we couldn't be the facade concept designer because we're a subcontractor to a main contract tenderer. So we can only price what has been developed before we became involved.
And having a design developed to the point at which you become involved, do you at least accept this, that from that point on, when pricing for the design, supply and fix of a complete envelope package, Harley could control, within the scope of the complete envelope package for which it was responsible for the design, the suitability of that design for the client?
Well, the key components to that were selected by others.
You see, Mr. Albiston is presenting this quotation on behalf of Harley as a quote for the design of a complete envelope package, not part of it. So my question again is, how do you reconcile your distinction between being a paid facade concept designer and not with what he's quoting for here as design of a complete envelope package?
Because the concept design is done long before we're involved, and we are taking that concept design into a package of cladding that's put on the building.
Let's look on then, paragraph 167 of your statement at page 42, please. The 167, this is an answer to a question. And the question I'll read to you: did anyone at Harley form a view as to whether the design of the facade complied with the relevant building regulations and associated guidance, in particular the parts of the building regulations relevant to fire safety? And your answer is, in terms of fire safety and design, what was important to us was the choice of materials and cavity barriers. As to that, I explained in answer to question 10A above, we formed the view that the design was compliant. Now, do you accept that in order to, as you put it, form a view that the design was compliant from a fire safety perspective, Harley would have positively to make an assessment of the fire safety and compliance in respect of each and every material component in the system?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if we look at page 10A, I'm so sorry, if you look at question 10A on the previous page, page 41, you are asked there what consideration was given to the compliance of the design with the relevant building regulations and associated guidance. And you answer at paragraph 166, you say, in the third line, we would not have used materials which were not compliant or safe, nor would we have designed an external facade which was not compliant or safe. At no stage has anyone raised questions or concerns about either the materials used or the design of the external facade. Do you accept that that answer doesn't actually tell us what actual consideration Harley actually gave to compliance? Does it? Doesn't do that.
No.
No. So can I ask the question, what consideration itself, independently, did Harley itself actually give to compliance of the design with the relevant building regulations and associated guidance?
We checked the BBA certificate for Renabond, which is Class O, and we checked the Celotex details and believe that was compliant as well.
Right. Well, we'll come back to those in due course. Now, can I then ask questions about a slightly different topic, but still about scope of your work, and that's windows. If you go to paragraph 29 of your statement, it's page 7, you say, between the end of January and the beginning of February 2014, Harley submitted a number of quotations for the external envelope work for the Grenfell project in support of a number of tenders submitted by potential main contractors Waits, Mullally Construction, Keepmoat and Durkan, which included Ryden. And then you go on to say, these quotations were all identical and included as requested alternative options for cladding panels, window types and window reveals as part of a value engineering, quotes unquotes, exercise, i.e. providing different costing options for the client for budgetary purposes. And then, yes, so we'll look at paragraph 33 in a minute. But my first question is it right that Harley was initially requested to quote for work to replace the windows?
Yes.
Yes. Then let's look at paragraph 33 on page 8. You say there at the bottom, whilst work in relation to internal window reveals was quoted for at this stage, excuse me, this work did not form part of the final contract, which was agreed at around £2.6 million. Ryden had indicated that this work would be carried out by another contractor, although in April 2015, Ryden would return to Harley to ask us whether we would carry out the work. Did you or anyone else at Harley make any inquiries as to who it was who was going to be undertaking the work in respect of the internal window reveals?
No.
Does it follow that you didn't know whether the work that they were going to be doing included design work on the internal window reveals or whether it was just product procurement?
Don't know.
Do you know whether any meetings were held between the subcontractor undertaking the internal window works and Harley to ensure that nothing was missed between the two?
There were no meetings.
There were no meetings. Do you know how work was divided up as between the installers working on the facade for Harley, on the one hand, the envelope, and those working on the internal window reveals themselves?
The Harley work finished with the windows and the EPDM to the side of it.
Does that tell us that, in fact, there was no coordination between the trades?
No.
Right.
Well, sorry, just to clarify that, because we were independent of the internal finishes, it was only once we'd finished, the area was free for the internal finishes guys to carry on, regardless whether we were there or not.
Maybe, but I think the answer to my question is there was no coordination,
No.
either on site or off site.
No.
No. Can I ask you to look at a statement of Mr. Dixon, Mark Dixon from SD Plastering? That's at SDP 50196, and I'd like to go to page 3, paragraph 13 of his statement. He says there, under the heading Instructions to Refurbish the Internal Window Surrounds, in or around April 2015, he says, I was asked by an employee of Ryden, whose identity I cannot recall with certainty, if SDPL would provide a quotation for undertaking cosmetic works in finishing off the surrounds to the newly installed windows in each residential unit at Grenfell Tower. Okay. And then he sets out who he dealt with there. If you go on in the statement to paragraph 29, that's by way of background for your benefit. If you go to paragraph 29 at page 6, he then says this: SDPL initially experienced difficulties undertaking the works due to the fact that, amongst other things, SDPL was reliant on Harley, having removed the old glass window panes from the old aluminium window frames and installing the new glass window panels in the new window frames, the glassworks, as he defines them, before the works could commence. Consequently, on the 29th of May 2015, I circulated the proposed sequence of works for the completion of the works to Ryden site manager Daniel Osgood, with a view to streamlining the relevant processes and procedures so as to enable SDPL to complete the works within Ryden's programme of work. Now, in terms of the installation of the windows themselves, is it right that remained part of Harley's work?
Yes.
Yes. And similarly, any cavity barriers which were to be installed in or around the window cavity?
Externally, yes.
Externally. And what about the gaps left by moving the window frames forward of the concrete curtain wall to sit within the cladding? That was Harley's responsibility, was it?
No, internally, that was the window linings would close that.
Internally, that was the window linings would close that. So with the windows pushed out to sit in the cladding beyond the concrete curtain wall, physically, where did Harley's responsibility end and SD Plastering's begin?
SD's Plasterings began closing the gap between the back of the window to the concrete.
Did you ever have a discussion either with Ryden or with SD Plastering themselves about what materials and products were to be used on the inside of the windows where they met the edge of the work that you had done?
No.
Did you ever take any steps to understand what it was that Ryden or SD Plastering were intending to do in respect of the areas around the windows on the inside where they met your work?
No.
If you didn't know what was going around the windows on the inside, how would you know whether your own design for the windows and the window surrounds within the facade were adequate or safe?
There was an expectation that the internal lining work would have been done correctly.
That expectation was never the subject of any discussion or verification or analysis by Harley that we can see in the evidence. Is that right?
That's correct.
Why is that?
Because it wasn't part of our package and it was something being undertaken by Ryden.
If you didn't know, well, I think I've asked that question. So does it come to this, that you just trusted whoever it was that Ryden subcontracted to do the window reveals to get it right without further investigation?
Yes, it wasn't part of our package.
Well, you say it wasn't part of our package. Was it not part of your responsibility in ensuring a safe system to satisfy yourself, as far as you could, that what was going into the structure on the inside of the windows, where it touched what you were doing, did not endanger the safety and integrity of what you were designing and applying to the building?
It wasn't something that we considered. We just expected that it would be done properly.
I'm now going to turn to a different topic, which is Renault bond and the rain screen. Can we start with paragraph 20 of your statement, please? Page 5. And you say there, Harley was first alerted to the Grenfell Tower refurbishment project, the Grenfell project, by Jason Tisbury, National Sales Manager of CGL Systems, in April 2013. Jason Tisbury had passed on Harley's details to Bruce Soanes of Studio E, the architects for the Grenfell project. So, can we take it from that you, or at least Harley initially, became alerted to the Grenfell Tower project via this company, CGL Systems,
Yes.
in April 2013?
Yes.
As early as that. And that was at an early stage of the project, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it was before, in fact, many months before it was put out to tender.
Yes.
Now, let's look at the email. It's at HAR 3015399. Dated 25th of April 2013, and it's sent to undisclosed recipients, subject project leads, and there seems to be an attachment. And he says, "Morning, I've just passed your details to the following architect for 2 live projects in London." And then near the bottom, he says, one is a tower called Grenfell Tower, where the client Westminster Council are looking to overclad an existing building. The other, a new leisure centre in Heston, where shingles are being proposed. And then Bruce Soanes' details are set out at the bottom there. I think Mark Harris was one of the undisclosed recipients who received this email.
I believe that's true.
Yeah. Did Harley have a previous relationship with CGL Facades?
Yes.
What was that relationship?
They are a cladding panel fabricator, similar to CEP.
Right. And what was the nature of your relationship with them?
They supply panels to us on other projects.
Right. And did they supply more or less or the same as CEP?
Over the years, CEP have probably supplied more to us than CGL.
Okay. And do I take it from that CGL and Harley had worked together on prior projects?
We had, yes.
Do you know which ones? As at 2013?
Not offhand, I can find out if you're interested.
What about, I mean, offhand, if you don't know, then you don't know. What about Chalcott's?
No, that was CEP.
That was CEP. And Ferrier Point?
I think that was CEP. That may have been CGL. I can't recall which was which.
Did Harley often get projects this way, with a fabricator letting you know that this project was live, or a project was live?
Actually, it's very common. Not just talking about cladding, but talking about window or curtain wall projects. A lot of the manufacturers and suppliers have an army of sales reps who, I think they're called architectural reps, that go around to architectural practices, talk about projects that are coming up, Schuco, Cornier, in terms of the curtain wall and window side, do it, as do CGL and CEP. So this is a very, very common thing.
Right. Can we look at SEA 407603, please? This is an email from Mark Harris to Bruce Soanes of the 25th of April 2013, cladding scheme Grenfell Tower, and attachments Castlemaine, Chalcott, Clements. Mark Harris says to Bruce Soanes, following up on the contact from Jason at CGL, this is a quick email to confirm our interest in the proposed overcladding scheme for Grenfell Tower. Overcladding tower blocks is very much what we do, and specifically in London, hence our keen interest in Grenfell. I've attached a small selection of tower block project info sheets and would welcome the opportunity of meeting up with you to talk through your requirements. It's fair to say, I think, from that Mark Harris was describing Harley's expertise as a specialist cladding contractor or subcontractor.
Correct.
Would it be normal for Mark Harris, as your independent sales person, as it were, to reach out to an architect in this way?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that as a specialist cladding subcontractor, this was just the kind of project that was well suited to Harley's expertise at the time?
Yes.
Now, he attached a number of project information sheets, and we've seen them, Castlemaine, Chalcots, Clements. Were all three of those projects in which ACM rain screen panels were used?
Yes.
Yeah. And does that, well, had Harley done jobs where ACM was not used? For example, zinc honeycomb?
No, we haven't used zinc honeycomb. We've used aluminium honeycomb.
Right. What about rock panel as
No.
a rain screen?
Never used rock panel.
Right. Is it fair to say that a significant number of Harley's building envelope refurbishments up to 2013 had used ACM cladding?
Yes.
Do you know what kind of percentage, even roughly?
On the high-rise towers, I would probably say 70%.
Right. Had you or anyone else at Harley previously sought any information from Alcoa, Arconic as it became, about the fire safety of Rainer Bond ACM panels for those previous projects?
Well, we'd had the BBA certificate from them.
Yes, and you said earlier in your evidence that you'd had that in 2008.
Yes.
Did you receive that certificate in respect of a particular project?
Yes, for Chalcot Estate.
For Chalcots, okay. Did you ask for it, or was it just sent to you as a matter of course? Do you remember?
There is a sort of fairly long story with Chalcot.
Well, I'm not sure I want the long story. I just want the short version of the answer to the question. Do you remember whether the BBA certificate came to you on Chalcots as a result of a request? Or as a result
It
of
came as a request from Ryden to Rainer Bond.
And who at Ryden requested the BBA certificate?
I think it was Steve Blake.
Right, thank you. And then he sent it on to you, did he?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I don't wish to stop you giving me some more context behind that if it's relevant, but I think it's enough for my purposes to know
Okay.
how it came to you. And then, is this right that when ACM was subsequently used on later projects, such as, for example, Castlemaine, you didn't ask for a revised or new certificate? You used the one you'd had on Chalcots?
I can't say for sure that we didn't get a new certificate sent to us from Rainer Bond for that. Certainly, they sent us a copy of the certificate for Grenfell.
Do you know why Steve Blake asked to see the BBA certificate for the ACM panel on the Chalcots project?
Yes.
And why is that?
We'd started the Chalcots project using a different product, something called Ettelbond, which is a similar ACM. We'd put it up on the first block. By the time, there are 5 blocks at Chalcots. By the time we were halfway through the second block, we noticed the panels were delaminating. We then went through quite a lengthy process of swapping out delaminating panels. There are a load of consultants involved with this at this stage. Barry Josie from Bickerdike Allen, Sandbergs were involved. The decision then came to change the panels, take the Ettelbond off and replace them with something else. Steve then employed Wintec, or another cladding consultancy, and asked for their opinion of what other products were available. So they sent Steve a spreadsheet of other panels which they thought were equivalent and suitable to be used at Camden. And Steve was keen, for whatever reason, to run with Rainer Bond as opposed to Luke Bond, and he then asked for all the certificates to do with Renabond, primarily because we didn't want to have the same problem with delamination. So there was a lot of investigation done into Renabond at that point, which is why I'm very familiar with the BBA certificate, because we studied it quite hard. So that's why that's the research we did into Renabond at that stage.
Thank you.
So we actually there's not just us looking at it, Am Rydens, we had Bickerdike Allen, Sandbergs and Wintec all involved with that project. And on completion of the project, we actually had warranties for the use of that product on those 24-storey buildings signed by Renabond.
Right. I'd like to turn to the meeting on the 27th of September 2013 at the Hayes Galleria venue. You deal with this at paragraph 21 of your statement on page 5, if we can just look at that. And then you say, on the 27th of September 2013, Mark Harris, Harley's commercial manager, and I met with Bruce Soanes and Thomas Reck of Studio E in relation to the Grenfell project. In advance of the meeting, Thomas Reck sent Mark Harris Studio E's scope elevation drawing series, Studio E's draft proposal of the design intent for the cladding, wind load calculations, and an excerpt from the engineer's report specifying U values. And then at 22, you explain that you describe the meeting, and you say, during the meeting, several aspects of the project were discussed, including available rain screen products, interface details, work program, access, design, and budget. And then over the page, you say, the architects wanted to discuss cost to help them with the budgeting for the project. As part of this discussion, a number of cladding options were discussed, including zinc, Proteus HR, and ACM, as well as the cladding configuration, i.e. cassette versus face fixed. Can you just help me? What discussions did you have with Mark Harris prior to the meeting about the strategy to be adopted at the meeting?
I can't recall.
In your experience, was it normal or usual to have a preliminary meeting with an architect to develop or discuss the design and materials before the project was even put out to tender?
Yes.
Mr. Reck of Studio E told us, this is day 12, page 66, line 24, that it was unusual in his experience. Would you disagree with that?
Yes.
I see. Now, you go on to say at page 22, and I've shown you this, already, you say Proteus ACM as well as the cladding configuration. And then you say at the end, at this meeting, it seemed that the architects had provisionally decided on zinc because of its appearance, as they were looking to achieve an industrial type look. Did Studio E say that they favoured zinc for its appearance?
Yes.
Are you aware of any reason why their preference for zinc at this stage was anything other than entirely aesthetic?
No.
Can we see ART 401487, please? This is Bruce Soanes' email. The same day, later that day, in fact, immediately after the meeting, to Philip Booth, who was Artelia, and Peter Madison at the TMO, as well as others. And he says, "Dear all, we met with Harley Curtain Wall this morning to discuss the project. They're very keen and have been tracking the project for some time." You see that?
Yes.
And they're specialists in this kind of project. They pointed to Ferrier Point as being very similar to Grenfell, although it's triple glazed and super insulated. We had forwarded them sample details and the elevation measured beforehand. And then I just want to focus on paragraphs 1 and 2. 1, their back of a fag packet budget, based on the areas, is, quotes, around £3 million, close quotes, which would include around £250,000 for mast climbers and zinc rain screen cassettes. Just note that reference there. This equates to 18% over our Stage D budget of £2.3 million. assuming access costs fall under preliminaries. And then 2, their recurring experience is that budgets force clients to adopt the cheapest cladding option, aluminium composite material, ACM face fixed. We have offered to forward a more detailed takeoff so that they can provide a more accurate budget. A zinc composite panel is also available, which is cheaper to install than a cassette. Now, I've read that to you in full, because my question is, do those paragraphs of this email accord with your recollection of what was discussed at that meeting?
I can't recall the exact what was exactly said, but it would seem the sort of thing that might be discussed, yes.
At this stage, was there any preference in your mind, or Mr. Harris's mind, so far as you knew it, for face fixing or for cassette fixing, one or the other?
No.
Did you detect any preference on the part of Studio E for cassette or face fixed?
I can't be certain of this, but
What impression were you given at this stage in respect of the flexibility about the material choices?
at that stage, I don't think they'd made up their mind what they wanted.
Was there any discussion about the safety of zinc cladding panels as compared with ACM cladding panels?
No.
Do you know who at the meeting initially introduced the idea of ACM cladding as an option for Grenfell?
It could have been Studio E. Or it may have been us. I don't know.
On the face of the email, where he says at paragraph 2, their recurring experience, that's Harley,
Yeah.
is that budgets force clients to adopt the cheapest cladding option, aluminium composite material, ACM face fixed. It looks from that as if it was you who initially introduced the idea of ACM. Can you comment on that?
No, well, we know that they were talking to other cladding companies and manufacturers long before we were involved, and the statement that clients generally go for the most cost-effective cladding solution, which is ACM and face fixed. So that statement's just a statement of fact.
You say you knew that they were talking to other cladding companies. How did you know that?
I think it's something they mentioned whilst they were talking to us.
Who do they refer to as other cladding companies?
I don't know. I now know who they are, but at the time they weren't specific about who they were talking to.
Right. You say you now know who they are.
Yeah, so I've probably forgotten who they are, but I know who they are, yeah.
Do you know who are they?
They were talking to CEP long before us.
Right. When you say cladding company,
Yes, CEP and
that's a fabricator.
that's a fabricator. Well, they also, yes, they're a fabricator.
But were they talking, to your knowledge, to any specialist cladding subcontractors?
They were, and I did find out. I've forgotten who they were.
Was there any discussion at this meeting about the material for insulation as opposed to rain screen?
I can't recall, but there was a U value calculation given. So I presume that would have specified the Celotex in there, but I don't think it was particularly discussed.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a moment. Was it your understanding in general terms that Studio E would have relied on what Harley was telling it at this meeting, only to present material options that were suitable for use on Grenfell Tower?
I would think that Studio would only present materials which are suitable for use.
Yes, and that to the extent that you were advising them or helping them, they would be relying on you as the specialists.
Yeah, and we certainly wouldn't recommend a product that we didn't believe was compliant.
No, that's not my question. Let me ask it again. Was it your understanding from this meeting that Studio E would be relying on Harley only to present material options in respect of materials that were suitable for use on Grenfell Tower?
I'm not sure they'd be relying on us at all.
So is the answer to my question no? You did not think Studio E would be relying on Harley to present materials that would...
Correct.
I see. So what was the point of the discussion then, if Studio E were not entitled to rely on what you, as the specialist potential subcontractors, were telling them about choices of material?
We went through a range of different products that could be used, and all of the products we discussed, we believe will be compliant.
Was there any specific discussion, as far as you can recall, at this meeting about whether ACM as the rain screen material was suitable for a building of this height, namely a building in excess of 18 metres?
It was just taken as read during the discussions that it was. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it.
I see. But so no specific discussion, but an assumption all round. Is that
Yes.
the gist of what you're telling us?
Correct.
Yeah. Did anybody at that meeting raise concerns about whether the use of ACM on Grenfell was appropriate?
No.
Now, we've looked at paragraph 2 of this email. Do you remember whether you or Mark Harris expressed a particular preference for any type of product?
Not at that stage, no.
So you didn't express a preference for ACM cladding at that meeting? Is
No.
that what you're saying?
Correct.
Mr. Soames has got you down in his email, and don't forget this was only a matter of hours, if not minutes, after it had finished, as saying their recurring experience is that budgets force clients to adopt the cheapest cladding option, aluminium composite material, ACM, face fixed. Was that in fact your experience?
Yes.
Yes. And what other projects had that occurred prior to this meeting?
I think all of the face-fixed ACM projects that we've carried out. So that would have been Chalcott's, would have been Ferrier. It's the way it always ends up.
Right. Were there any projects that you'd done involving ACM which were cassette?
At that stage, no, there weren't.
No, really? Okay. So does that tell us that on all the projects you've done so far, all of the clients have been forced to adopt ACM face fixed on the grounds of budgetary considerations?
I can't speak for the clients, but my
your
impression is yes.
Right, thank you. Did you yourself or anyone else at Harley, to your knowledge, consider, either on this project or any of those prior projects where ACM FaceFix was used, the relative fire performance of ACM face-fixed as opposed to any other form of rain screen?
No, we believed that the ACM was fully compliant with building regulations.
Yes, I know you've said that. My question is a different one. I'll repeat it. Did you yourself, or so far as you know anyone else at Harley, actively consider, either for this project or any of those prior projects you've referred to where ACM face-fixed was used, the relative fire performance of ACM face-fixed in comparison with any other form of rain screen product?
No. So although we've always had our doubts about high pressure laminates, we've never used those.
Would you agree with this proposition that, at least at this stage, of all the professionals working on the overcladding of Grenfell Tower, Harley were in the best position as the specialist cladding potential contractor to make an assessment of whether any of the materials to be used in the cladding system at Grenfell were compliant with statutory requirements?
Not at this stage.
No, okay, not at this stage, but later on?
I don't think, with regard to the materials, we were any better positioned than anybody else.
Just moving to the question of the insulation at this meeting, can I ask you to look at Bruce Soanes's witness statement, which is at SEA 30142773, and I'd like us to go to page 114, please. And if we look at paragraph 271, he says 2/3 of the way down that paragraph, he says, when I met Harley, and this is a reference to the 27th of September meeting, because we can see that from the previous paragraph. He says, when I met Harley, I believe I had a lingering uncertainty about PIR because this was a high-rise, and I had not been involved in a high-rise before. I believe, but I cannot say for sure, that I asked Ray Bailey a question about the acceptability of using rigid foam insulation on a high-rise building, probably at the end of the meeting. If I did, I don't recall he provided a definitive response. Do you recall Mr. Soanes raising this query with you during that meeting?
Absolutely not.
You say absolutely not. Are you categorical about that in your recollection?
It would have struck me as an odd question to ask.
Why is that?
If they've specified, well, two things. They have specified the PIR, and it's a product that we hadn't used on the high-rise building at that stage.
You say they have specified the PIR. Is that entirely right, given that this is September 2013,
Well, I think
some
that,
months prior to the compilation of the NBS specification?
correct. That was picked up from the U-value calculation.
Were you provided with the U-value calculation prior to this meeting?
We were, yeah.
You were. I see. So that comes from an earlier document. And then you say it's a product we hadn't used on a high-rise building at that stage.
Yes,
So this would have jumped out at you.
it would have.
Was the fact that PIR, as you say, had already been specified for this building not something that already jumped out at you, given that you hadn't used PIR before?
No, the question would have leapt out at me. It's been specified, and they're asking us, what do we know about it? That's what it's leapt out at me.
Now, Mr. Soanes was asked about this exchange, and he said, I wonder if we can actually have his evidence up, so I can put it to you. It's the transcript for day 20, at page 46, at line 24. And Ms. Grange asked Mr. Soanes at line 24, do you have any recollection of discussing insulation with Mr. Bailey of Harley at that meeting? And then she says, over the page, can you actually recall discussing the insulation as distinct from the rain screen panels? And his response was, at line 3, I believe I asked him about the acceptability of using a rigid foam, and I might not have mentioned it was Celotex. We did discuss insulation in the round because we discussed the assembly of the facade, the sequence, how it would all be supported. So in a general sense, we did discuss insulation. On reflection, I believe one of the reasons I might have been prompted to ask, not just any kind of lingering uncertainty, but I think we were shown several pictures of the Ferrier Point Tower under construction, and those in progress construction, you could quite clearly see where the insulation was mineral wool. Yes. Question. Answer. That's in hindsight. Those pictures have been disclosed by the inquiry, but we didn't receive digital copies until 6 months later, I believe. Now, do you recall Mr. Soanes asking about the acceptability of using a rigid foam on a high-rise building, as he says? Did you show Mr. Soanes pictures of the Ferrier Point Tower under construction?
I think Mark sent over some photographs of buildings that had been done prior to the meeting, but that's a matter of record. I can't.
Yes, well, let me see if I can jog your recollection.
Sorry, Mr. Millett, can I just interrupt you? At the moment, the transcript doesn't record the fact that Mr. Bailey answered the question beginning, do you recall Mr. Soanes asking about the acceptability? He answered no, before you then asked your next question, did you show Mr. Soane's pictures? So I just mentioned that in case it gets lost. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we'll make that correction in the transcript. Can I seek to jog your recollection by showing you one or two of the pictures?
Sure.
First of all, SEA 403497. Looking at this, did you show Bruce Soanes and Thomas Reck this image or similar images at the Hayes Galleria meeting?
I can't recall, but yes, probably.
And let's look at another one. SEA 403516. 3516. Same question. Do you recall showing Studio E this image at the Hayes Galleria meeting?
I can't recall whether that was a specific image or not, but it's
Right.
entirely possible.
Would you agree with me that it's quite apparent from these images that the yellow material we can see is mineral wool insulation?
It is.
Yes. And do you recall discussing whether the insulation to be used on Grenfell was mineral wool or rigid foam, in contrast to the insulation used on Ferrier Point?
I can't recall.
Did Studio E ever ask you, or indeed to your knowledge anybody else at Harley, about the suitability of the Celotex insulation or about its compliance with fire performance requirements?
Not to my knowledge, no.
What impression were you given by Studio E about the flexibility in the choices of insulation material at this stage?
There were none.
There were no choices.
No choices.
So does that mean that the choice has already been made and it was the insulation that had already been picked in the U-value document you referred to?
Yes.
I see. Was there any discussion about cavity barriers at this meeting?
No.
What about shortly after this meeting? Do you remember?
I don't believe so.
Right. Can I ask you to look at Mr. Reck's statement? He's Studio E as well. SEA 30142781. 14278, page 30, paragraph 124, please. And he says there, under the heading cavity barriers, as item G in his statement, he says, in the second sentence, I do not recall how Studio E sourced these cavity barriers. Those are the down cladding systems barriers. But my drawings show cavity barriers at the floor and party walls. I think I discussed cavity barriers with Harley, but they may have been included in our drawings before Harley and Studio E were in contact in autumn 2013. Do you recall whether you discussed cavity barriers at the Hayes Galleria meeting or afterwards, later in 2013?
I don't recall any discussions
Right.
about the cavity barriers.
So where Mr. Reck says he thinks he did discuss cavity barriers with you, do you think that's right or do you think that's wrong?
I think that's wrong.
Right. Do you remember whether Thomas Reck ever consulted you or anybody else at Harley, to your knowledge, in relation to the cavity barrier scheme?
Not to my knowledge.
Mr. Soanes's evidence was that he had thought that Thomas Reck had consulted you on the cavity barrier strategy. And just for our references, and perhaps yours as well, that's day 21, page 74, lines 20 to 26, and day 21, page 82, lines 23 to 25. We don't need to go to that.
Yes.
That's for our benefit. But I wouldn't mind your comment on that. Do you agree that Mr. Soanes's recollection is correct, that Mr. Reck did consult you on the cavity barrier strategy?
No, I don't. And certainly when we got the contract, the first question that we had was asking questions of Studio E with regard to the cavity barriers.
I see. In general terms, just coming back to the meeting, what was your impression of the budget which had been set by the client at that stage?
I don't think we knew the budget. I think my recollection is that Mark did a back of the fag packet price and then sent it over to Bruce Souness.
Yes. When you gave the back of the fag packet figure of approximately £3 million, did that include the estimated cost of design, procuring and installation of the entire facade?
It's the back of a fag packet, so we have a square meterage rate that we can we're comfortable with being able to put a system on the wall, and that's an all-inclusive price. But of course, until we get exact details of what they want, the exact size of the building, it is only it's a ballpark figure.
I see. So you've got a per measurement figure.
Yes.
And the reason it was ballpark, as you put it, is because you didn't know the precise measurements of the building.
Or the precise makeup of what we were doing, whether it was going to be.
No, I understand that. I understand that. But I think the answer to my question is yes. It includes the cost of design, the cost of procurement, and the cost of installation of the whole facade.
Yes.
Yes. Now he then goes on to say, and if we can get back to the email, please, which is at. So sorry, this is at ART 401487. Second paragraph again. He says a zinc composite panel is also available, which is cheaper to install than cassette. Do you remember discussion about that in particular?
I don't. At one point, there was Ned Zinc product proposed, and that wasn't by us. We've not dealt with Ned Zinc before. But a zinc composite panel is the same as an ACM, except the outer face is zinc as opposed to aluminium.
Right. Can I just go back then to a document I haven't shown you? HAR 405992. This is the email from Bruce Soanes of Studio E to you and Mark Harris, which follows the meeting. Dear Mark Ray, thank you very much for the conversation this morning. It was very useful, and I'm especially grateful you could come into London. We will follow up early next week with a quantity takeoff from our model. I've communicated your back of a fag packet figure to the QS, and it is over budget, which is to be expected, but some firmer budgets will help focus everyone's minds. We're looking seriously at Ned Zinc composite panel. The small sample we have in the office looks like a Leucobond, but it's apparently zinc. What did you understand Mr. Soanes' reference to focusing everyone's minds to mean?
I'm not sure I can speak for Bruce Innes, but I would imagine that there is a budget somewhere that may need to be exceeded or increased to give them the figure, give them the look that they want.
Yeah, well, to cut to the chase, were you concerned that your back of a fag packet estimate of about £3 million appeared to Mr. Soanes to be too high at that stage and may need revising downwards?
No, we were at the start of a fairly long process.
Yes, I know that. But to answer my question, were you concerned at the time that your back of a fag packet figure, I know it was the back of a fag packet ballpark figure of 3 million, might have been too high and needed to be reduced?
No, I wasn't concerned.
He says, as I've shown you in the second paragraph, that they're seriously looking at Ned Zinc's composite panel, and he refers to the sample in the office. Is it fair to say that initially, to your impression, the architect's preference was for a zinc cladding product?
Yes.
Yes. Did you express any concerns that it would be challenging to provide a zinc product within the back of a fag packet budget of £3 million?
I can't recall.
Now, after that meeting, on the 4th of October 2013, do you recall The Studio E asked Harley for an information and costings about a Ned Zinc product.
I think it's a matter of record, yeah.
Yeah, well, let's look at HAR 405461. This is an email from Bruce Soanes on that date to Mark Harris, copy to you, with some drawings attached. And in the third paragraph, Mr. Soanes says, the client's response to your budget was, well, what about aluminium? We haven't had samples or costs back from Ned Zinc, but this could be ideal if it eliminates the need for a fabricated tray and is true zinc. Fabricated trays and is true zinc. And then it says, would it be possible to come back with budget costs? Or what would the material cost uplift be for a Nova composite versus a metallic faux zinc Reno bond panel? Do you know what efforts, if any, Harley went to obtain pricing for the Ned Zinc product?
I don't offhand. I'm sure we provided some prices.
Okay, well, let's just pursue this a bit more. HAR 405997. This is an email from Mark Harris to Bruce Soanes, 18th of October 2013, copied to you. Let's look at the second paragraph. We've put a budget spreadsheet together, which you can see is attached, which is based on using the Renobond natural zinc product fabricated into cassettes as a starting point. Do you know why Renobond was being proposed at this stage rather than any other aluminium panel manufacturer?
No.
And then he goes on in the fourth paragraph to say, the most expensive option is obviously the natural zinc cassettes. If standard ACM was to be considered in a zinc colour face fix, the saving could potentially be over £500,000. And then he goes on to say, as said when we met, we have a number of examples of high-rise residential blocks in London where standard aluminium face-fixed ACM was used. We could forward some photo images or arrange site visit as and when required. And do you know what Mark Harris was referring to there by the phrase standard ACM?
As a standard ACM is one with a standard colour paint finish, as opposed to a special effect.
Right. And what would constitute non-standard ACM?
It's a non-standard. It should say non-standard finish ACM.
I see. So you're talking about finishes.
Yes.
Do I take it from that the distinction between standard and non-standard is not the distinction between PE and FR, fire retardant or fire resistant core?
No.
Right. Do you know why face fixed is so much or was so much cheaper than cassette?
Yes. With face fix, if you have a panel, for example, that's a metre square, you take a metre square flat sheet, cut it up and put some holes around the side of it, and pump it all. The fabrication of that is very quick and easy, and you've got a square metre of panel on the wall, from a square metre of panel from the stock sheet. If you use a cassette, you have probably 150 millimetres all round for the sides which are folded in. So to get a metre square face area, you're now using 1.7 metres of panel to achieve 1 metre on the wall, and the fabrication cost is a lot higher.
So two things then. You need more of them to cover the square foot area or square metre area, and you've got to have the fabrication costs.
Yeah.
Right. Do you know whether Mark Harris's prices would include a fabrication cost?
They would, yeah.
Just help me with this. When Harley buy or source cassettes from a fabricator such as CEP, is there a supply contract as between CEP and Harley?
There's an order.
There's an order.
Yeah.
And the price that you're quoting is the price that you get from CEP, is it?
Our price that we're quoting to the client is the panels, the insulation, the rails, the assembly, the design. So all sorts of things are added to it. The actual panel cost is an element of our final sell cost.
So is the chain like this? Rainer Bond sells the panel to CEP. CEP buys the panel, fabricates it,
Yeah.
sells it to you for a higher price,
Yeah.
and then you quote an even higher price to the client.
Yes.
Yeah. And if it's face fixed, you don't need the fabricator.
No, we need the fabricator.
What does the fabricator do?
He chops the sheet up to the required size and puts the holes in it.
Right. Again, question, do you know why Mark Harris was promoting ACM, and particularly Rainer Bond ACM, at this stage, in 18th of October 2013?
I'm not sure that he's...
No, that's a fair answer, and I need to show you the Harley budget cost document. Perhaps I should just do that. That's at SEA 402275. There it is. We're going to come back to that in a very few minutes, but just to ask the question again based on the enclosure to the document, to the email, you can see that here's the budget, 18th of October 2013, and you can see from the second and third items, it's a Rainer Bond zinc cassette rain screen cladding, finial screen, crown, no insulation, and there's a price for that. And then underneath that, Rainer Bond zinc rain screen, spandrel cladding and insulation, there's a price for that. And then there are other Rainer Bond products identified lower down. You see that?
Yes.
So Rainer Bond is there. And if we go to page 2 of this, well, perhaps we don't need page 2 at the moment, but you can see Rainer Bond is the product that's referred to in there as the rain screen. And my question is, why only Rainer Bond?
I don't know. I presume they've actually had prices for zinc previously.
Do you know why Mark Harris didn't include quotes for Ned zinc panels in this email, given that that was one of the products in which Mr. Soanes was interested?
I don't at that stage, but I do recall Mark trying to get some prices for some alternatives, and after 3 weeks they just sent back a square metre rate with extra overs for corners and bends. So it wasn't, the information we got back from the supplier was actually useless.
Yes. Do you know why, well, did you or anyone else at Harley suggest a Luco Bond as a panel to Studio E?
The ACMs that we discussed were generic ACMs, and I think Rainer Bond seems to have been the one that settled on because the early discussions Mark had with CEP and Debbie French, I presume.
Right. Is that why, or does that explain why Harley was so keen to stick with Rainer Bond? Because of a relationship?
I don't think we have a relationship, but we're a cladding supplier. We can supply whatever the client wants.
Can I show you the Luco Bond product brochure? That's at SEA 30144431. Are you familiar with this document from work on other projects, do you think?
I'm not sure I'm familiar with that particular document, but we do know Luca Bond, yes.
You know a Luca Bond.
Yes, and we
In any of the high-rise residential overcladding products that you've done, did you use a Luca Bond?
Yes, we had a Luca Bond, I think it was on Ferrier Point.
Okay, right. So you were familiar with the Luca Bond's products then?
Yes.
I would take it. Right, well, let's look at page 32 of this document then. Because you can see from that there are 3 types of panel. A Luco Bond, a Luco Bond Plus, and a Luco Bond A2. You see that? And a Luco Bond Plus, a Luco Bond itself comes with a PE core, and I'm summarising it, but you can see that, I think, from the picture. A Luco Bond Plus comes with a mineral-filled core, yes?
Yes.
And a Luco Bond A2 comes with an A2 rated core. Were you aware of these different products in late 2013 available from Aluka Bond?
I wasn't there.
You weren't. Can you explain why you didn't, or no one else at Harley took steps to look into Aluka Bond as a separate product supplier, particularly given what they were offering so far as rain screen panel products were concerned?
No.
Did you ever, I suppose it would follow, that you'd never advised anyone at Studio E of the existence of these different products?
I think Aluka Bond was discussed. It appeared in the NBS specification.
Was in the NBS specification, but was there any discussion about it at these meetings?
When we were at the meetings, we were talking generically about ACMs.
Did you give any consideration as to whether any of these products here on this page might have been suitable for use at Grenfell?
We didn't get into the detail of Aluka Bond.
Did your knowledge and experience of Aluka Bond's products from earlier projects and the fact that they come with different cores not cause you to ask similar questions of Rayner Bond? For example, do they come with an FR core or a mineral core?
No, I wasn't aware of this particular document.
No, but in general terms, did Harley ever investigate with Rayner Bond whether they could provide the same core product that Aluka Bond provided?
No.
Can you explain why that is?
The two products that Renabon provided, and the term Renabon, when we talk about it, no one ever talks about Renabon P, it's always Renabond. And the FR product, which appears on the same BBA certificate, both of those products are rated as Class O. And the only difference in the European standard is that the FR product produces slightly less smoke than the standard Renabon product.
Was that how you saw it at the time?
Yes.
I see. Mr. Chairman, this is probably an appropriate moment for a short break.
Yes, that suits you?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, we'll have a short break now, Mr. Bailey.
Okay.
We'll take 15 minutes, come back, please, at 25 to 4. And no talking to anyone about your evidence, please, or anything to do with it.
All right.
So you go to the usher now, she'll look after you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, 25 to 4, please. Thank you. Yes, would you ask Mr. Bailey to come back, please? Right, Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Ready to carry on?
Yes.
Thank you, yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Bailey, can we go back to Mr. Harris's scope of work spreadsheet of the 18th of October we looked at a moment ago before the break? SEA 402275, please. It was attached to the email we saw. Do you think you read this at the time?
I probably glanced over it.
Right. Now, we can see that it said on page 2, if we look at page 2, under heading 2, Design, we just look at that, our budget allows for a full design package, including GAs, detailed design of a system and interfaces, samples, no full working mock-up allowed for, material schedules and production drawings. It also allows for site surveys, O&Ms and covers a sum for PI insurance. Now, we looked earlier on in your evidence at the LOI from the summer of 2014. This is a much earlier document. This is October 13. Do you agree, having seen this, that Harley was, right from the outset, offering to provide Studio E with full design services within its budget?
Yes.
And that understanding never changed after that, did it?
Well, this was... sorry, this was in October, this one.
Yes.
Yeah, within the limitations of what was set out in the NBS specification, we did allow a full design package.
Now, before we leave the budget, can I ask you to look at page 2, under exclusions, a little lower down the page we're looking at? You see it says exclusions there.
Yes.
And it says there, exclusions, no allowance for fire-rated products. What did that mean?
This is to do with fire-rated glass, which is used to protect walkways, and that would have a potentially a 60-minute insulation and 60 minutes integrity screen, and those are very, very expensive and sometimes sort of dropped in to the specification. So it only relates to fire-rated screens.
Right, as you say it's fire-rated glass. I mean, on the face of it, there's no reference to glass there.
No.
It just says fire-rated products, and to the untutored eye, that would include FR-ACM. Does it not include FR-ACM?
No, it means simply fire-rated screens.
Right. Can I ask you to look at HAR 405996? This is an email from Mark Harris to you on the 25th of October 2013 at 13:08. You see that? It's the second email down. First of all, this is from Thomas Reck to Simon Walker at SIG, a cladding manufacturer, 25th of October 2013. And then we can see that Thomas Reck passes Mark Harris's email details to SIG or SIG and asks them to send a quote directly to him. You can see that.
Yes.
And then Mark Harris sends this email string to you same day, FYI, and says, looks like our old mates at Studio E are now referring all manufacturers to us on Grenfell. Can't be bad. What do you understand old mates at Studio E to have meant in this context?
I think that's just a markism.
A markism. Okay. Had Studio E and Harley worked together previously?
No.
Right. So you say it's a markism. To your understanding, did this markism mean that Harley had got in early and were able to exert some influence on Studio E, at least in respect of product selection?
Not with regard to product selection, but it does mean that we've got a foot in the door.
Right. A foot in the door in the sense that whichever contractor won the tender, you would be strongly in line for subcontract.
No.
Foot in what door in what sense then?
Well, that it gives us a little bit of an edge, but no more than that, because depending on which main contractor wins the tender, they will go out to, depending who they are, 4 to 6 cladding subcontractors to get their price. So we don't. The fact we're doing a little bit of work at this end is trying to give ourselves a little bit of an edge, but there's no guarantees in this whatsoever.
Is it fair to say that in forwarding inquiries from cladding manufacturers directly to Harley, as we can see they were doing, Studio E were letting Harley take the lead in the selection of materials at this stage?
No.
So why were they doing all that then? Why were they sending you the material or the quotes?
Well, I think at this stage we were still doing budgets. So it's, if you're talking to this is, I think, yeah, these are suppliers. This is SIG suppliers, so they're talking, giving us prices so that Mark can include them in his budget.
Let's go to HAR 3010172. And I'd like to have pages 2 and 3 put up side by side, please. This is an email from Mark Harris to Thomas Reck of the 7th of November 2013 at 8:23. As you can see from the bottom of page 1 over to the top of page 2. Now, you're not copied in on this, but Mark Harris is, as is Mike. Sorry, you are copied in on this. I'm so sorry. You are copied in on this. And you can see that Mr. Harris says, "Good morning, Thomas." And then under a Proteus HR composite at £282 per square metre, he says, "Quite what finish this is based on, I have no idea due to a lack of information." And then he says, "I have to say, from a Harley selfish point of view, our preference would be to use ACM. It's tried and tested on many Harley projects, and we are confident in the costs base. That said, we are, of course, an envelope contractor and would be happy to clad the building in the material of choice." Is it fair to say, looking at that Harley was positively encouraging the use of ACM cladding at an early stage as suitable for Grenfell Tower?
No, I don't think we're pushing it particularly.
Well, we can see what Mr. Harris says, that expressing a clear preference for ACM as tried and tested, confident in the cost base, and I'm really seeking to ask whether you agree that that tells us that Harley was positively encouraging Studio E to use ACM.
No, I don't think that's positively encouraging to go that route.
Why was Harley's preference for ACM?
Because we have a supply chain, in fact a multiple supply chain for ACM. We're confident of the cost base and the lead times for it. So from that point of view, it's a more reliable product to supply.
Right. And given that Harley had a preference for ACM, why was Harley telling Studio E that it preferred ACM for use at Grenfell?
For those reasons.
Right. So do you accept that Harley did have a preference for ACM at Grenfell?
Yes.
Did that preference extend to a particular ACM product or supplier?
No.
Do you agree that price and or aesthetics were the dominant factor in those discussions relating to panel options?
Between Bruce and Mark, yes.
Yes. Looking at this email and the expression of this preference, would you agree that Harley were, in essence, advocating the selection of ACM cladding panels and actively seeking to persuade Studio E to change their provisional specification from zinc to ACM?
No.
Or at least to use ACM as an option, an alternative option in the NBS?
No.
So why do you think Mark Harris told Mr. Reck at this stage, November 2013, that Harley's selfish point of view preference would be to use ACM? What was the point of him telling them that?
Well, there were a number of different products being talked about, over which Harley had no control at all, and I think probably Studio E didn't have a lot of control. The client at the end will choose what they want on the building. So of the products which are being talked about, Mark's expressed a preference for ACM.
Right. Can I ask you to look at a different document, which is Deborah French's police witness statement, which she made on the 14th of September 2017, so very nearly 3 years ago. It's MET 30190063. And at page 2 of that document, which has got paragraph numbers, paragraph 4, she says, Rainabond aluminium composite material, ACM, was made, so far as I was aware, with either a polyethylene core, PE, or a fire-resistant core, FR. The Rainabond stainless steel composite material, SSCM, and Rainabond zinc composite material, ZCM, were produced with only an FR core. Now, it would appear from what we saw earlier that Alcoa also produced a zinc composite material, or ZCM. Were you aware of that at the time of your involvement in this project?
The Renabond to a zinc composite material?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And Alcoa also, sorry, yes, Rainabond did, yes. Was that material, zinc composite material, ever considered for use on Grenfell?
I don't know. There may have been mention of it somewhere, because basically it would be the same stuff as Ned zinc.
Were you aware that zinc composite material, or ZCM, was only produced with a fire-resistant or FR core?
No.
You didn't. Did it occur to you that one of the consequences of proposing an aluminium composite material instead of a zinc composite material was that the core could be formed of polyethylene and therefore not necessarily fire retardant or fire resistant?
No.
Were you aware that in fact an FR core ACM panel was available from Rainabond?
Yes, only because it was on the BBA certificate.
So you, which I think you told us you read when it was first promulgated or published in 2008.
Yes.
At the time of the discussion of ACM for use on Grenfell, as we've just seen in Mr. Harris's email in November, October and November 2013, does it follow that you were aware that an ACM panel from Rainabond could be supplied with an FR core?
Logically, yes.
Will you say logically?
Well,
it would follow from the fact that you'd read the BBA certificate that
yes,
you did know.
that's correct. But on the advertising material, all the information we had from Rainabond, at that time, there was no play made about FR materials. The only place it appeared was in the technical table at the back in resistance of fire, and both that and the PE core were were signed off as Class O. So it's not. In later editions, they've actually made quite a big issue of the FR, but certainly at the time we were looking at it, it was a product that was never talked about.
So is the gist of what you're telling us this, that at the time of your discussions with Studio E about the choice of Rainabond ACM in October and November 2013, you knew that Rainabond supplied an FR cord ACM?
Yes.
But you didn't discuss it?
No, it was as I say, it was Class O rated the same as the ordinary Renovon.
Was there a price difference, did you know, between FR core and PE?
At that stage, because no one had ever discussed the FR, we didn't know that there was a price difference. I imagine that there would have been a price difference, but as I understand it now, it's £1 a square metre more, that's all. So from our point of view, if it had been offered at £1 a square, we would have bought it. It's, you know, and you would wonder why, if there's that little price differential between the two, why anybody would stock both types.
Did you actually, at the time, consciously think, I have a choice here
No.
between PE and FR, and I'm going to plump for PE?
No.
What did you think was the point in Reynobond having in their product range an FR panel for ACM if the fire performance was the same, class 0 in both cases?
That's a very good question.
And what's the answer?
The only use I would have thought that the application for that would have been on a walkway if we were within a metre of an adjacent building on a fire escape route.
How would that have made a difference?
That's the only place I could see where this product would stand out.
Were you aware at the time of any difference in attitude as between FR core and PE core that CEP or other fabricators had?
No.
Did CEP have a particular preference for PE as opposed to FR?
Not that I'm no, and but this is relevant. On Jeff Blade's witness statement, he said he'd never heard of FR.
Does that surprise you?
Yes.
Did you ever have a discussion with Jeff Blades on this or any other project about FR?
No.
Can we look at HAR 30010160, please? Now, this is page 1, as you can see, a sales progress report form for the Grenfell Tower project, which was compiled by Mark Harris, starting on the 1st of March 2013. Can we look at page 3 in that, please? He's written there, against the date 5th of December 2013, as the penultimate entry, is a file note. Call received from Simon Lawrence at Ryden to advise that they attended the main contractor project intro meeting with the client and architect yesterday, and others in attendance included Keepmoat, Durkin and Waits. When the architect gave a slideshow presentation of the scheme, Harley's name was included on the slide and verbal reference was made to the assistance that we provided. Did you see this file note at the time, do you think?
No, I wouldn't have done.
Right. Do you know how Mark Harris, and we can ask him about this, but do you know how he kept this document? Was it available to everyone in the office?
It was, yeah.
It was. Did you keep a check on it, on the projects you were involved with?
No, I kept in touch verbally with Mark.
Right. When he says Harley's name was included on the slide and verbal reference was made to the assistance that we provided, do you know, or did you know, why Ryden was telling Harley that?
I don't know why Ryden told us that.
Did you get the impression from what you knew, and he may not have seen this document, that Ryden was keen to have Harley in there as its subcontractor?
No, we worked with Ryden before and had a good relationship with them, but when these projects come out, they go to a number of cladding subcontractors to get prices. So they may have preferred to work with us, but that was by no means any guarantee that we would get the work.
The picture seems to be here that Harley was, even at this stage, so late 2013, pre-tender, influential in the choices of cladding material both as regards Studio E and, in fact, now, as it seems, as regards Ryden. Would that be fair?
No.
So how can you explain why it was important for Mr. Lawrence at Ryden to tell Harley that it had provided great assistance in relation to the project at that stage?
Sorry, why it was important for him to tell us?
Yes.
I think he was just chatting to Mark about the job and said, guess what I've seen?
Yes. I mean, it looks on the face of it that here is Ryden telling Harley that the architect is on side with the appointment of Harley as the subcontractor because of the assistance that it had provided. Is that a fair summation of the position?
I think they would have been happy for us to be appointed, yes.
Was it normal in your experience for Harley to be closely involved in pre-tender discussions this way?
It's not unusual.
Now, if we go to your witness statement, you say at page 7, if we can just look at that, in paragraph 26 there, in the last line, there was no particular advantage for Harley in using the Renault Bond ACM. Now, that's your statement. If we can look at a document, RYD 403913, please. This is an email from Mark Harris to Simon Lawrence at Ryden, dated the 22nd of April 2014. So this is post the winning of the tender in March by Ryden. And in the third paragraph there, and you didn't see this at the time, he says, I would prefer to try and stick with Renault Bond if pos. Nothing wrong with the Luca Bond, of course, but I'm not sure we can manage the cost so well if we go that route. Now, to what extent did you or anybody else at Harley ever actually investigate using products, rain screen products, supplied by Renault Bond's competitors?
We've used Renault Bond before, so we have no issue. Sorry, a Luca Bond. We have no issue with a Luca Bond.
So it's not quite an answer to my question. My question is, to what extent did you or anybody else at Harley ever actually investigate using products supplied by Renault Bond's competitors?
On Grenfell, I don't know, but we've used a Luca Bond on Ferrier Point and subsequently used them on other projects.
Yes, I know, you've explained that before. If I were to suggest to you, you didn't look at any other competitors or any other manufacturers of rain screen products other than Renault Bond. That's right, isn't it?
It would appear so, yes.
Yes. And why is it that Harley could manage the cost of Renault Bond better than it could with the Luca Bond? Do you know?
No.
Given that Harley had used the Luca Bond and Renault Bond, as you say in your statement, on a number of projects previously, can you explain why there was such a preference for Renault Bond on the Grenfell Tower project?
No.
Had you suggested a Luca Bond to Bruce Soames at any point, do you think?
Possibly. And the other thing that's interesting is when we talk about, nobody used to talk about ACMs. This is a thing that's come out more recently. A Luca Bond is the brand name. It's a bit like Hoover for ACM. So it's quite possible that when we talk about a Luca Bond, we mean ACMs, and ACMs we mean a Luca Bond. So it's quite entirely possible we've spoken to Bruce Soames about a Luca Bond.
can I go to HAR 000010172, please? And I want just now to explore the relationship between Rainer Bond and Harley. Just look at one or two documents on that subject, if I may. This is an email from Mark Harris to Bruce Soanes of Studio E of the 21st of November 2013, so a little bit back in time from where we were. This is in the context of the selection of materials. And you can see from the bottom of the page that it follows on from Bruce Soanes' letter or email to Mark Harris and Thomas Reck, copied to you, about materials, particularly about KME Proteus square metre rate. So this is a little bit later in November, but still at the time when, just for context, the NBS specification is being developed. Mm-hmm. And he says, apologies for the delayed response. I only just received a response from Rainer Bond. They were holding out on us because they were originally talking with another company and were concerned about maintaining loyalty on the basis that the other company introduced them to the project. Once I pointed out how much business we do with Rainer Bond, it focused their attention. How much business did Harley actually do with Rainer Bond, Alcoa that is, by the end of 2013? Or as at the end of 2013?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
What, was it a lot, a little?
Well, we've done the 5 blocks at Camden. We've done a block at Heathrow, and I can't remember on Little Venice whether that was a Luca Bond or Rainer Bond. So we do quite a lot of business with both of them.
Right. And how much business with Rainer Bond was ACM business? And when we say Rainer Bond, does that mean ACM?
It does.
Right. And that was all PE, not FR?
Yes.
And who were the individuals at Harley who customarily dealt with individuals at Rainer Bond?
Primarily Mark.
And who was it at Rainer Bond, or Alcoa, I think they were still called that at this time, with whom Mark Harris customarily dealt?
Well, Deborah French,
yes.
but a lot of the conversation was through CEP and Jeff Blades at CEP.
Right. So there was a triangle, roughly.
Yes.
Right. And do you know how and when Mark Harris's commercial relationship with Deborah French began?
The first reference I have to Deborah French and Rainer Bond would be 2008.
In the context of what project?
Chalcott Estate.
Right. Do you know whether any incentives were provided to Harley by Rainer Bond to use their products over other cladding manufacturers?
No. No, they weren't. Not.
Did you?
No. I don't know the answer. No, they weren't.
No, they weren't. So no better prices, no better terms and conditions.
Well, price is always a factor, depending on the project. So there's some projects that a Luca may want on a particular time. They'll give us a better rate, but that's just normal commercial business.
Now, in this email, we can see that Mr. Harris is drawing attention to the strength of the relationship between Rainer Bond and Harley. Was it your impression at the time that that relationship was such that Harley was in a better position with Rainer Bond as opposed to any other suppliers of rain screen?
I think Mark thought we may be able to squeeze a little bit of price out of Rainer Bond.
I see.
But there are plenty of ACM manufacturers out there, and we only deal with 2 of them.
And it looks from this as if Mark Harris had persuaded Rainer Bond to engage with Harley rather than its competitors who might have been out there competing to supply rain screen on the Grenfell Tower project. Is that a fair reading of this email?
In terms of engaging with us, yes.
Yes.
It doesn't mean to say that Renovon didn't give the same price to our competitors.
Can you go to your statement then at paragraph 27, page 7, please? You say there that Harley discussed cladding options being considered by Studio with Deborah French in the autumn of 2013. Who at Harley had those discussions? Was that Mark Harris?
Yes, I
Were you privy to, or can you tell us anything about the content or nature of those discussions?
I think I've seen some email chains where Deborah French is sending emails to Mark sending them back, and I think there may even be some emails with Studio E involved.
Could you look at page 28, paragraph 112 of your statement? You say there, this is 10 lines or so up from the bottom. You say, having reviewed Harley drawings for the Grenfell project, Alcoa, now Arconic, never raised any concerns or questions about its use. We looked at that earlier before in your evidence. This is a slightly different question. Do you remember which drawings, which Harley drawings, were sent to Deborah French?
No, I don't.
Did you, or to your knowledge anybody else at Harley, make Deborah French aware that Grenfell Tower was a high-rise building which exceeded 18 metres in height?
Yes, and I know now that Deborah French and Jeff Blades met with Studio E architects way before we were ever involved, so they were full knowledge of the project, completely independently of us.
Do you know when that was?
I think it was, from documents I've read, I think it was February 2013, although it may have been earlier.
Right. Do you know whether Miss French knew what other materials were to be used within the cladding system? For example, RS 5000 or FR 5000 as it then was?
I don't know.
You don't know. Can I ask you to look at CEP 3049719, please? This is an email from Deborah French at Alcoa, later Arconic, to Neil Wilson, Jeff Blades and Roy Fuster at CEP. And it's dated the 13th of May 2013. And I just want to look at it with you in some detail. She says, hi, and the subject is BBC report, ref ACM in UAE. As you may be aware, there have been some reports via BBC concerning a fire on a building in UAE regarding ACM. As a business, we are aware of this report, and our technical team are following the details. But in the meantime, I wanted to add some thoughts that may help if you get questions from your customers, clients, etc. Regarding the supply of Reynobond in the UK, as you know, we supply both PE and FR core and can control and understand what core is being used in all products due to the controlled supply route we have. By only supplying Reynobond to a very small group of approved fabricators and working very closely with them on all projects, we are able to follow what type of project is being designed, developed, and then offer the right Reynobond specification, including the core. At this stage, we will continue to offer both PE and FR core and continue the close working relationship we have with our approved fabricators to make sure the right technical support, Reynobond specification and materials are being used and installed on Reynobond projects. Many thanks for making me aware of the reports and for your continued support. Warm regards, Debbie. Were you made aware at this time or at any time thereafter, May 13, of this email or the gist of its contents, do you think?
No, I'm shocked.
Why are you shocked?
Well, they're actually talking about the fire and the cause, and they're telling CEP, and none of that's been fed back down to us.
So you're shocked. Did you not see this email in the course of
No,
preparing your witness statement?
I've not seen that.
Right. Were you aware, I think it would follow, I think I know the answer to this, but I have to ask it, that the fire performance of ACM would differ, perhaps considerably, depending on whether a PE or FR core was being used?
The PBA certificate I've seen shows that they're both class O, with one producing slightly less smoke than the other. I know when the fire tests were carried out after the tragedy that both the FR and the PE core failed the tests.
Can I then turn to the Booth-Muri quote? Are you familiar with what that means?
Yes, I know Booth.
Yes, all right. Well, let's see see if we can take this quite quickly. Can I ask you to be shown BLM 6014, page 3, please? This is an email from Mark Stapley to Stuart Murden at Booth-Muri, dated the 25th of February 2015. And it's copied to Ben Bailey, your son.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Stu. Further to our earlier telephone conversation, please find attached our panel requirements for Grenfell Tower. Please can you provide us with your most competitive price and also confirm lead times? If you require any further information, please do not hesitate to call. Were you aware at this time, February 15, that Mr. Stapley had approached Booth-Muri for a quote?
I wasn't.
You weren't aware?
No.
Now, take this from me. We can be checked if I'm wrong about this. But Alcoa Arconic had given a price for Rainer Bond ACM per square metre of £23.75p to Booth-Muri, but the price that Arconic gave to CEP at this time was £23.25p per square metre, a 50p difference per square metre. Did you know that Arconic had given CEP a better price for ACM than Booth-Muri?
No.
Would you? Does it surprise you that they did that?
It's 50p difference.
Yes, but does it surprise you that there was a difference?
Not especially, no.
Can you account for it?
It may be to do with the quantity that they buy and they get a bulk or a discount.
Can I ask you to look at BLM 709 at page 1, please? This is an email of the 6th of July from Ben Bailey to Booth-Muri Inquiries email address. This is at the bottom of the page, providing drawings to quote against the Grenfell Tower project. Please can you quote an expected lead time as well? The response to it is the next day from Jim Blair to Ben Bailey, 7th of July. We're awaiting a reply from Rainer Bond as whether we can procure materials quickly. And then that continues at the top of the page with further exchanges on the 8th of July between Jim Blair and Ben Bailey and others. Now, at this stage, CEP had already started supplying the Rainer Bond ACM in March 2015. That's right, isn't it?
Yep.
Do you know why it is that Booth-Muri were approached for a quote after Harley had already engaged CEP to fabricate the panels for Grenfell?
It may be because CEP were slow in delivering the panels and meeting the programme. This is one of the advantages that we spoke of earlier about the use of ACM, because we actually have a number of suppliers who can provide us with the same thing.
Right. Do you know that, or is this something I should be asking Ben Bailey?
It's something I suspect that's the answer.
Right, okay. Now, I want to turn to a different topic, which is the relationship between Harley and Ryden. Can we start with RYD 401228? This is an email of the 24th of August 2013, so pre-tender, from Mark Harris to Jonathan Rowland at Ryden, and you're copied in on this. I'll just wait for it to come up on the screen. Yes, there it is. And it says, "Hi, Jonathan, are you guys tracking a project called Grenfell Tower? We have been tracking this one for quite a while. The application was withdrawn, but some updated elevations have appeared on the planning portal, and the ODU has been advertised. This one has quotes, our quotes, name written all over it. It's typical of the type of work we were jointly involved with at both Chalcots and Ferrier. I've attached a copy of the ODU plus a copy of the latest Abbey report, typical elevation, and an image of the existing tower facade, and you can see the attachments there. Is it right to say that Mark Harris was liaising with Ryden at really a very early stage, August 13, regarding Grenfell?
Yes.
Yes. Now, let's look at this. It's RYD 401398. This is an email of the 27th of September 2013, just after the Hayes Galleria meeting we discussed earlier this afternoon. And we can see that it's in fact the same day in the middle of the afternoon. It's only a few hours after that meeting. And it's an email from Mark Harris to Steve Blake and Jonathan Rowland, and you're copied in on it. "Hi, Steve, how are things progressing with the PQQ on Grenfell Tower? As you might recall, we made contact with the architect about cladding back in April. He called up a few days ago and asked for a meeting. Ray and myself met with Bruce Soanes and Thomas Reck of Studio E Architects this morning. We had a good session talking about several aspects, including available products, interface details, program access, design, and budget costs. We spoke extensively about Ferrier, point being that there are a number of strong similarities between Ferrier and Grenfell. I think they might well pay a visit to Newham in the near future. When are you expecting to hear back on your PQQ submission?" I've read that in full to you, so you can see the full extent of the exchange or the statement there. Ryden at this stage weren't formally involved in the project, were they?
No.
And they were just a potential contractor.
Yes.
And that would be something for the TMO to decide who to put on their list.
Yes, that's what the PQQ's for.
Exactly. But nonetheless, here is Harley keeping Ryden aware of developments. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Did you have a personal contact at Ryden at this point?
How do you mean a personal contact?
Well, we can see that Mark Harris talks to Steve Blake. Let's start with Mark Harris. Was Steve Blake and Mark Harris well known to each other?
Steve Blake was the contracts manager at Chalcots and became the contracts director at Ferrier Point. So on those two projects, yes, we knew Steve Blake.
Yeah, and Steve Blake was known to you, presumably, as well.
Yes.
From Chalcots and Ferrier Point.
Correct.
Yeah. Would it be unusual for Harley to be talking to or nudging along a potential project with a possible potential contractor even before the tender process had really got going?
Yeah, it's not unusual. A lot of these projects that we get involved with can run for years before they come to fruition. So it really isn't unusual to be talking to potential main contractors.
Right. Can I ask you to go to HAR 50913? This is an email from Mark Harris to Simon Lawrence, copied to Steve Blake and others, including you, 7th of February 2014. Now, 7th of February 2014 is at a time when the tender process is ongoing, but hadn't been decided. Morning, Simon. Just another quick update on what we know so far. According to Keepmote, they declined in the end due to tender timescales, as did Waits. I believe this leaves you guys, Durkan and Mulally, I spoke with Mullally yesterday, and the chap there said he'd been busy on another tender and won't get around to looking at it until early next week. Durkan are the only ones that have shown any interest at all, but to be honest, they have no pedigree with this type of work. Hopefully, all this means that Ryden will be in a strong position. It's all down to you now, Simon. No pressure. Regards, Mark Harris. Why do you, I mean, you were copied in on this. To your understanding, why was Harley keen to ensure that Ryden was kept so up to date with the progress of the bid for the main contractor and the doings of other potential competitors in the bid?
I think it's because we had a better relationship and history with Ryden than the other main contractors.
Right. It looks from this that Harley was keen to see Ryden appointed as the principal contractor on Grenfell. Is that a fair?
I think that's a fair point.
Fair point. Can we look then at the tender, ART 402087? Just looking at page 1 of that. This is the tender submission. It's dated 13th of February 2014. You can't see it from this page, but take that from me. Do you recognise this document from its first page?
No.
You don't? Did you ever see the tender submission?
No.
You didn't?
No.
Do you remember whether you or anybody else were asked to provide Ryden with information about Harley for putting into their tender submission?
I don't remember, but it wouldn't have surprised me if Mark supplied some information for them.
Right. Did you know that Harley had been asked to provide, or rather, let me put this a different way, did you know that Harley CVs for particular executives were held by Ryden?
No, but again, I'm not surprised. They could have come off previous projects we worked with them.
Well, let's look at page 44 of this document. We can see here, this is deep into it, and this is part of the CVs for the people that will be working with Ryden on the team. And here it says, Grenfell Tower, Harley Curtain Wall Limited, supply chain partner to Ryden Construction. I'm just pausing there. At this time, mid-February 2013, what arrangements were in place as between Ryden and Harley to make Harley Ryden's supply chain partner?
None.
Can you explain why Ryden was telling its potential client, the TMO, that Harley was its supply chain partner?
No, particularly as they were subtly telling us that our price was too high and can we have some money off, please?
You can see that Mr. Anketel James's CV details are set out there, and if we flip over the next page, we can see that there are other CVs for other people, like Mark Stapley.
Yep.
And next page, please. Rob Maxwell. Next page, please. I'm not sure that one takes us very far, but certainly you can see the ones I've shown you, and it looks from this document, perhaps you can't comment, but that Harley and Ryden were being presented by Ryden as a joint venture or joint partnership.
I think that looks correct.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Right. Did Ryden ever come to you and say to you, well, look, we're including some CVs of your surveying team and your designer in our tender submission. Can you just make sure they're accurate before we send them out?
I don't know.
Right. So you can't explain why Mr. Stapley's, for example, Stapley's CV was included in here?
I suspect it was requested by Ryden's and Mark must have sent it over.
To your knowledge, did anybody at Ryden seek to tailor the CV of each of these individuals to the range of skills and the job that they were supposed to do on the Grenfell Tower project if Harley were appointed as subcontractor?
This is a new document, so I don't know what they've done.
Can I just, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at the clock as it ticks
Yes.
towards 4:30. I'm going to have a go at the next topic, but I may not complete it.
Well, you've got 5 minutes. Is it worth starting it?
I don't think I'm going to complete it in 5 minutes. I might. I think better not try it.
Probably wiser.
Yeah. Is that a convenient moment?
I think it probably is, yes, thank you. Well, Mr. Bailey, we're going to call a halt there for the day,
Okay.
but I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to come back tomorrow to face some more questions. I hope that's convenient. So we'll stop now and we'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Fine.
And please remember, as I've said to you many times now, not to discuss your evidence or anything to do with it while you're away from the room.
No,
Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much for being here today. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you.
And if you go with the usher, she'll look after you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good. Thank you very much. We'll stop there and resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, please. Thank you.